Shadows dance across the memories of a life left behind. The room is thick with the sound of emptiness. Does anything remain? Or is it all lost to the wiles and winds of time? Without a clear picture, it's hard to say. It's that special time of day, and here we are once again, trying to make sense of the pieces scattered in front of us. Jeremy Johnson was a quiet person, always gentle, always unassuming. It was as if a part of him felt dedicated to live life as the supporting cast to everyone else's adventure. He was kind, the type of person you would want to have in a group of friends, but never quite the first person you would think of to pick for anything, really. His parents were kind and caring people. They tried to support their son as best they could, and in many ways, they were what could be considered good parents. This didn't matter much in the end, however. They died in a car crash when Jeremy was little. It was a sudden and shocking tragedy. Many people gathered together at the funeral. It was a parade of broken hearts and sympathetic wishes. All in attendance were grieved. All except for Jeremy. Perhaps he was too young to understand what was going on, or perhaps there was something wrong with him. It's difficult to say. But what we do know is that a young boy watched his parents be buried in a cemetery that day, and he felt nothing for the entire procession that came with it. We'll continue our story in a moment, but first, let's take a look at traffic. A tumbling tumult of terror tears through thoughts like troubling thunder. Its dynamic display of disorienting dread is duly disguised with the dreary domain of the human mind. Powerful prose propagates poisonous panics to imprison perception. These are the moments when fear blurs the lines of reality. Summer haze is fading fast. Here among the storms that passed, a stormy sky, a foggy road. What new mysteries do they abode? Run, little searcher, while you can. Run, little searcher, from the remains of the Shadowland. So it appears that there's a brand new roundabouts, and it's between Willow Way and the Glamrock District. It's a bit chaotic as everyone figures out how to navigate around it, so take care while traveling. And this is all for traffic. Now back to our story. After the funeral, Jeremy was sent to live with his grandparents. They were nice enough on the outside, but it was clear that there was some deep pain on the inside. Though they wouldn't admit it, a part of them blamed Jeremy for the accident. And over time, that resentment, that confusion, that frustration built up over and over, until there was a subconscious wall separating everyone. Despite this, Jeremy didn't seem to mind the distance. After all, he was a quiet person, always gentle, always unassuming. It wasn't in his nature to prod where he wasn't wanted. He did well in school. His assignments were always turned in on time, and he never had trouble with any of his peers. He never had much of anything with his peers. There was an aura to Jeremy, thick and heavy, like an overwhelming fog that seemed to follow him everywhere. The other kids kept their distance. Jeremy, for his part, respected this and did his best to work within these boundaries. He was kind after all, content to be the supporting cast of everyone else's story. At least, that's what he told himself. In truth, he wasn't content. He wasn't much of anything. Just numb, just empty, where there was the faintest inkling that something should be there. The other kids saw him, and they felt uneasy. When Jeremy saw the other kids, he felt nothing. It was simply the way things worked. However, there was an exception to this rule, and her name was Bella Jewel Mowbray. More on this after a word from our sponsors.
I hear the bell toll, its ghastly aria sings. More fall gray and cold. A city of death, an endless maze of tombstones, all echo the bell. The end comes for us all. Might as well scrapbook the journey. Joanne's Fabrics and Crafts. Mention this ad and get half off all scrapbooking supplies at checkout.
The dynamic investigator and her quiet assistant, the adventurous troublemaker, and the unassuming voice of reason. Together, they made quite the pair. Bella Jewel would drag Jeremy onto her next big adventure, and he would keep her from going too far. Jeremy liked Bella Jewel. In a world that felt numb and gray, she was a spot of sunlight. She was an unpredictable force that seemed to bring out something else within him. As the two got older, that bond only grew stronger. The years brought with them a stronger relationship, more adventures than could be said, and even a brand new partner, Olivia. Unlike Bella Jewel, she was calm and level-headed. There was a laid-back attitude to Olivia that only seemed to add more life into Jeremy's new adult world. The three of them established themselves, growing into the people that they wanted to be. Olivia made her way through the police academy. Bella Jewel was off to become a big-time reporter. And as for Jeremy, well, he didn't have a goal to pursue. Not really. He was happy enough with the life he had, and so found himself doing whatever job he could. It didn't have to be glamorous. It just had to be. And so in the end, he became the assistant to the mayor. Jeremy liked his job well enough. The mayor was stern, but kind. It was clear that she had many secrets weighing on her shoulder, but Jeremy never asked. he never felt the need to. After all, Jeremy Johnson was a quiet person, always gentle, always unassuming. He was the type of person you'd want to have in your friend group, but never quite the first person you would think of to pick for anything. The mayor had secrets she didn't wish to talk about, and Jeremy was more than happy to give her that space. Silence became an unspoken agreement, which then built a strange form of trust. The mayor would need something done, and Jeremy would do it. There were no words of why or how or what, just simply the task and having it done. For a while, this was a good arrangement. Oftentimes, the mayor's requests were mundane, predictable for an office environment. Take notes in a city council meeting, file some paperwork, pick up orders from the nearby cafe. Other times, her requests were stranger. Track down a glass key, survey the nature of trees on an abandoned hiking trail, destroy an old box of tapes. Regardless of the task, Jeremy approached his work with dedication and a feeling of numbness in his heart. It was all the same to him. But Bella Jewel saw things a bit differently. What happens next is soon to come. But first, a poem. To keep up appearance is a tricky show. A porcelain facade needs no questions asked. Everything lives in a fine status quo, but it all falls apart when you notice it's cracked. How far will you pull on a single thread? How far until the answer is clear? You push and pull against all signs of dread, and that's how you've fallen down here. How far will you stumble on this road to hell? Look upon the reckless waves of your trip. For a foolish man will condemn himself, but a greater fool sinks the whole ship. Not much remains of your many attacks, and all this because you noticed the cracks. Jeremy Johnson was a quiet person, gentle and unassuming in most situations. He seemed content to live most of his life as a supporting character in everyone else's story. That is, until Bella Jewel took the story to dangerous new heights. Something had changed in relation to his job, his friends, and even himself. For so long, he felt numb. He felt empty. But what seemed to be a single instant, everything was shaken up. The calm and empty gray that surrounded him became a fierce and tumultuous storm. It scared him. So much had shifted, and it only continued to change faster and faster. For his part, he tried to end it. He tried to calm things down and bring the many pieces of his life back to the same calm numbness that it was before. But the storm only grew. The world felt even colder. The stage was set, and he had cast himself as the supporting character, a witness to the disasters unfolding before him. He should have been content. After all, he was quiet. He was unassuming in the face of everything. This was only an extension of all that he was, and he hated himself for it. Because it was his hands that caused the damage. The mayor had ordered him to destroy a box of tapes, and instead of doing so, he showed them to Bella Jewel. And in that moment, the rest of the play was set into motion, and all he could do was take his spot and watch. Jeremy Johnson was never one to face direct conflict or anything like it. He had lived his life as quietly and as gently as he could. But this was different. Something had changed. The world was falling apart and something within him shifted. He no longer wanted to stand in the background. And so Jeremy rose up and did something he never thought he could. He intervened, and the consequences follow. We'll take a look at those consequences soon enough, but before we do, let's take a look at the weather. A thick fog devours the sky. Memories of sunshine fade. A world where all colors die. The wind howls as clouds pass by. Its tumultuous storm parade. A thick fog devours the sky. The sunlight's gone far out of sight. All is left in hues of gray. A world where all the colors die. You can't escape although you try. The path before you's laid. A thick fog devours the sky. Walk with hope and dreams to fly. Find somewhere far from this charade. World where all the colors die. A distant man stands with tears in eye. Is he real or just a shade? A thick fog devours the sky. A world where all the colors die. And this is all for the weather. The most surprising part of the aftermath was the lack of consequences that followed. Life returned to normal. The mayor was fine, chipper even. It was as if nothing had happened. There were no questions asked nor words exchanged, just the same unspoken dynamic that had defined the bounds of their relationship before. She would have a job, and Jeremy would do it. There would be no comments nor questions asked, just life as it had always been. It felt a bit strange to suddenly return to normal. It felt like a letdown after the weight and anticipation built towers on his shoulders. But it was normal life, and that was hard to argue with. After a week, Jeremy found himself slipping seamlessly back into familiar patterns. His life had returned to an equilibrium. It was calm and level, like a thick, unbroken sky of gray clouds surrounded by a thick fog on the world below. Everything was back to the way it had always been. It was as though the panic that had come before was only a figment of his imagination. All of the panic and worry was a dream. Well, except for one major detail. Bella Jewel was gone, and she wasn't coming back. A hole had formed in the story of Jeremy's life. He would wake up in the morning and look for a message from someone who wasn't there. He would stop by the coffee shop and sit with Olivia in an idle silence that seemed to wait for someone to say something. He would deal with many interesting things at work, and yet not have a single soul to tell them to. He didn't feel the need. After work, he would come home to an empty apartment, look longingly at a message from someone who was worried about him, and yet say nothing at all. Instead, he would find himself staring blankly out of the window. It would be quiet, and not in a way he was fully comfortable with. Part of Jeremy missed Bella Jewel. He felt the empty hole where her presence once was, but he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know how to feel about it, or any of the events that had happened. Others would try. Olivia would come many a time, but the same, there was a distance there that kept them both apart. Jeremy had many mixed feelings. In his own way, he had played a part in Bella Jewel's disappearance. His hands had blood on them, and yet Jeremy couldn't bring himself to feel guilty. This wasn't out of apathy or anything. It's just that Jeremy didn't feel much of anything anymore. His feelings were gray and dull, just a familiar numbness, followed by an empty inkling that seemed to indicate that something was supposed to be there. He wasn't sad at the disappearance of Bella Jewel, or angry at the people who may have been involved. He wasn't even scared at the possible repercussions he could face. All that was there was numbness and cold, like the feeling on your face after a long walk on a foggy day. Jeremy Johnson was a quiet person, gentle, unassuming. It was a part of him that felt dedicated to live life as the supporting cast to everyone else's adventure. He was kind, supportive, the type of person you would want to have in a friend group, but never quite the first person you'd pick for anything. He was far from the type of person to stir up danger, which is why he was confused when you went into work one day, only to find his desk completely cleared. There was only a single note waiting for him, an address and instructions to be there once the sun had set that evening. It was a direct order from the mayor. She had told him what to do, and he had made sure it got done. No questions, nor comments of any type. That was the nature of their relationship. And so, that was the way that Jeremy responded. It was unusually cold that night. Summer had long passed, and all has shifted into the cold and misty embrace of autumn. Jeremy dressed a little warmer that night. Just an old, familiar black trench coat and a red beanie he had picked up from somewhere he couldn't quite place. It helped as he walked to where the mare had set for him to meet. A thick fog enveloped him that night. It seemed to grow stronger with each step until Jeremy at last reached his destination. He stood at the base of a trail, Devil's Gate. The trail had been closed for many years, and it was clearly showing signs of neglect from the many abandoned years. A faint carving of a path snaked its way into a towering clump of thick, dark trees. It was like the tongue of a large, shadowy monster. The fog blocked the path back, and so only one way remained. With a heavy breath, Jeremy trudged the landscape of a thick, wild unknown, leading only to dark places of shadows and formation that is only known as the doorstep. What he found at the trail is unknown. Perhaps it was the secret to the disappearance of Bella Jewel Mallory. Perhaps it was the consequences he thought would never come. Whatever it was, all we know is that Jeremy Johnson went in, and that was the last that anyone had heard and seen of him. A body, alive or dead, was never found. Most believe he died, taken up by the cruel hand of nature. After all, the Devil's Gate is a very old trail, and it's filled with dangers of disrepair. Much of it could have eroded away, and it's not hard to imagine someone getting injured, and then simply lost to the ravages of time and nature. But others still believe he's out there, shifted in forms, but still here with us to this day. He was a quiet person, after all, gentle and unassuming, passionate with those he cared about. According to legend, you can still see him standing in the distance on a cold and foggy day. Whether or not this is true, well, it's hard to say, but honestly, who cares? It's all in the past now. That's all that is left to say about it. We are who we are now, and I don't think we should stay with ghost stories for too long. Stay tuned for a life well lived and the consequences that follow. I hope that when the time comes, that they find you satisfied and at peace. But we can only wait and see. In the meantime, enjoy the storm. It may be cold and muggy outside, but it can still be a very good night.
Dream Girl City is written and produced by NJ Schulze. It was acted by NJ Schulze. The poem for today was Cracks by NJ Schulze. Have a comment? Have a theory? Just want to support the podcast? Please consider looking us up on social media or email us at DreamGirlCityRadio@gmail.com. All the details are in the description for you. The music for this episode was provided by Holizna, CC0. Thank you for the contributions and for everything that all of you are doing. Keep on theorizing and keep on pushing. We're getting towards a very big and exciting end. But until we get to that time, just remember, it's always a blast to come face your past.